Now we have the second panel discussion of the day, and this is on a critical aspect on cybersecurity. So it's called Creating a Protection Framework Against Malicious Attack Specific to the PSU Ecosystem. And for that, we have another very interesting set of panelists. It's my pleasure to call on stage Mr. Sandeep Khanna, Director Information Security and CISO with UIDAI. Can we have Mr. Sandeep Khanna on stage? I would like to call on stage, round of applause for him. Next, I would like to call on stage Alok Shankar Pandey, Additional General Manager IT and CISO of Dedicated Freight Corridor Corporation of India. I'd like to call on stage Anwaya Bilas Sengupta, Chief Manager and Alternate CISO of Grid Controller of India Limited. I'd like to call on stage Manmeet, Sain, Head IT and CISO of India Energy Exchange. Can we have Manmeet, Sain on stage? Okay. Okay, he must be joining in. I'd like to call on stage Virander Singh, DGM and CISO of Indraprastha Gas Limited, IGL. And I am Rajneesh, the editor with APAC News Network, and I'll be moderating this discussion. If the volunteers can just maybe Manmeet Sain must be outside. So they can request him to join here. Okay, so again, to give a structure to the discussion, while we are talking about creating a protection framework against malicious attack, the way we would like to start is first, we need to identify the root cause of the problem, only then the solution. So I'd go to each of the panelists and ask each of you to highlight one form of malicious cyber attack or vulnerability that a PSU organization, especially with respect to the organization that you are representing, is currently facing. And the nature of that, if you can, not very detailed, but slightly elaborate on the type of that specific vulnerability. Yes, we have Manmeet Sain, Head IT and CISO of India Energy Exchange also. So, as I mentioned, I'll start with Mr. Sandeep Khanna. If you can highlight the one severe type of malicious attack that a PSU environment is vulnerable to, and very briefly explain what is the nature of that vulnerability.
Okay, good afternoon everybody, and thank you for inviting me for this to this August panel. So when I talk of when I say attack is malicious. So when I say that, generally when you say we should not be categorizing it saying that what it would be in terms of PSUs or anybody, but today it is a very porous thing. So the attack is relevant to even the corporate or the PSU. Phishing is one form of attack which I would say is inherent, and it is always the initial vector which an attacker uses. And when I talk of any specific vulnerability to it, nothing. It's pure social engineering is actually what the attacker takes care of. And it is a social engineering only despite the number of controls which we have brought into our email system. Despite that, we find that we get phished, and there's a compromise which happens of your ecosystem through that one vector or that one user who has faulted on it. So to my assessment, phishing is something which one should be wary of and should take robust measures to ensure that it can be minimized.
Thank you. So obviously phishing, and I'm sure we'll talk a little more about on phishing during the course of this discussion. That's the area where most of the users are also vulnerable to many of the phishing attacks. Next, I'll come to you, Alok Shankar Pandey, and in terms of the malicious cyber attack, where do you see the vulnerability, especially in a public sector organization?
At the outset, thank you for giving me this opportunity to share my thoughts. And before I actually address your questions, a disclaimer: whatever I say are my personal views, do not represent the views of my organization, either served in the past or present. Now coming to the vulnerability part of it. Digital infrastructure in itself is the vulnerability.
True.
The very fact that people have decided to go digital brings in a lot of infrastructure. And that infrastructure needs to be managed in a particular manner. PSU specifically, the infrastructure is distributed with large geographies. And when you're distributed over large geographies, first biggest vulnerability, first biggest challenge that I see is asset visibility in itself. Once you have the asset visibility, you can probably do something about it. So the number of assets which are not visible and they remain vulnerable. And technical vulnerabilities, I'll put it aside for a second. The biggest vulnerability is the skill set of the team who is managing this IT infrastructure. Unpatched infrastructure, state getting involved, all that is a different, but unpatched infrastructure, distributed, and asset visibility not being there is, to my mind, the biggest challenge which is there.
Okay, so two very important areas that you touched upon. One, when you are talking specifically about public sector organization, most of these are involved in a large capacity or scale. So obviously, the impact of the vulnerability will also be magnified to a large extent. And second is, which is applicable to any organization, I would say that internal vulnerability itself is perhaps one of the biggest challenge. Anwaya, Bilas, Sengupta, I'll come to you next. And in terms of the challenge that you would like to highlight, and where is that vulnerability?
Okay. Again, thank you, APAC, and thank you for this wonderful panel. I'll just try to take you through a different ballgame and different journey altogether, because I belong to a different type of an industry, which is basically national critical information infrastructure. We own and we are connected to a very large set of critical information infrastructure. And so I'll try to highlight one thing, which I believe is the most important perspective from maintaining the cybersecurity or the information security infrastructure of our organization, as well as the entire power sector as a whole. That the interconnectivity and the spread across the global spread. We are spread across India, connected to the end mile. And the spread so far as the various organizations, various administrative controls are concerned. So in India, suppose for data acquisition purpose, we have SCADA, etc., which is spread across state-owned stations, private-owned stations, maybe very small renewable energy generators to very large generators like plants of NTPC or NHPC. And then again, on the other hand, we are connected to the all substations, state-owned substations, power grid-owned substations, and we are accumulating data from there. All those data are coming through a pipeline, and those are coming into the state load dispatch centers, then coming to the regional load dispatch centers, national load dispatch centers. So it's a huge network, number one. Number two, now the attackers are highly skilled, mostly the state-sponsored attackers. So they do a lot of reconnaissance. They sit inside. There are a lot of persistent threat inside. And I see the vulnerability from three different layers: the people, process, and technology. From people perspective, obviously you can understand such a large layers of people involved, from a very small RE plant where an operator is operating to a large utility like NTPC or Power Grid. The level of understanding, awareness on cybersecurity, level of technical know-how, all those varies. Then from the process perspective, there are different administrative controls. The resources being deployed in different administrative layer in states, in central government, in PSUs, in private organizations are different. And to have a synergy in that, to have a really a collaboration to ensure cybersecurity is really challenging. And third, obviously, is the technology. Technology, one of the biggest challenge in the technology is transferring data from remote to your system in the OT network, then further for analytics taking that to the IT network. Because ultimately nowadays you really cannot imagine a OT network which is totally isolated, which is not connected to internet, because you need to patch the system, you need to have antivirus update, all those things, and then you need to take those data to your IT system for various analytics, for various business processes. There also you have exposure to the internet. So all this mix up to a very complex system where there are a lot of vulnerabilities.
Okay, so I'd like to highlight the two important points you mentioned. The people part we had talked about earlier also, but process and technology are also three critical pillars. And the other part, again, from an utility perspective, where you are speaking, it's today just not possible to isolate the network and work in that way. And utilities, not just in India, we have seen globally lot of very malicious attacks on utilities, even in very developed economies where the technology. So that's a serious challenge, and we would come in the next round to talk about some of the best practices that can be applied there. Next, I'll come to Manmeet Sain in terms of the vulnerability and biggest challenge, if you can briefly mention that.
Okay, so as we know that digital era has been increasing and continuously increasing on very fast manner, and in this digital world, I think everyone is vulnerable, so much vulnerable. We have to see what level of criticality of that vulnerability holds it, right? So we talk about for any, even if we PSU organization or of any enterprise organization in the digital era, the user, which I feel that user is the most vulnerable area, where a lot of studies has proven that more than 65% of attacks has been happened because of the user awareness, because of the lack of user I would say the responsibility, or unknowingly he has clicked on some malicious link, he has opened some websites. So we have to strengthen our controls in all the areas. We talk about people, process, and technology also. Technology is definitely everybody is focusing about, but people and process are not as much as strengthened it should be, right? Because now hackers are so smart, they are innovating hacking innovations. Earlier they were I think taking more than 50-55 days. Now they are just performing attack in any organization in just 4 days because of the AI/ML, right? The things are growing very fast on that manner. Now earlier only professional attackers were able to perform any attack. Now any I would say the student who is doing some study, some research, he can also perform with the help of the AI. And then so we also have to be enough smart. So accordingly, if we educate enough to our people, our employees, then I think we can safeguard ourselves at very much level.
Okay. So you are reiterating the point of increasing the internal awareness and internal education in terms of making people sensitized to the vulnerability scenario. Okay. Virander Singh, again, that in terms of the biggest challenge and vulnerability, that again, you are from an utility perspective, what you can tell.
So good afternoon, everyone, and thank you very much. Actually, day by day, the attack surface is increasing as per our business needs or the work environment. Earlier, we worked from an office. Now we are working from anywhere and anytime from work. Accordingly, other parties, earlier we have data centers, our own data centers or something. Now we are using cloud services, SaaS services as well. So the attack surface increases. Accordingly, we should have the systems and the checks, controls accordingly, so that if someone working from their home as well, they have the device which may be their personal device as well, that must be sanitized, must have basic security checks like antivirus, Windows update, patched, proper patched, and if they are working from their home, they must have at least two-factor authentication, VPN-like solution, so that at least we know who is accessing and from where, and also we have to educate our users which information they have to access, which is sensitive information, which they can or which they cannot use on a plain network or through internet. So if we educate our employees, our contractor, our third party staff as well, so several problems may be addressed in easy manner.
Okay, thanks. Thanks. So, you are again talking about the practical aspects of vulnerability, especially when in a typical today's work from anywhere environment, the surface of the attack or the vulnerability surface has increased. Okay. So, I'll come back to you, Sandeep. Now, from a perspective of your organization, you deal with a lot of data, and a lot of those data will also have the privacy part. Privacy aspect is also critical. So, when we combine the security and privacy aspect, how would you look at ensuring that both are sort of not compromised, and two, are there a lot of even regulatory compliances that you need to conform to? So how would you ensure all the three happening, and any best practice that you would suggest?
So I'll take on what Alok said, that as a disclaimer, that these are all my personal views and will not take it to the organization. But if I talk of data protection as such and bringing in privacy also in loop to it, it is like when you talk of data per se, the basic control which you need to have on it is in terms of it being encrypted at rest and at in transit. That is what. In memory, maybe a wishful, maybe an effort would be a tall call, but if you can do that, great. And when you talk of privacy per se as such, privacy, yes, it's question of data minimalization. You will see how when the DPTP comes up and how it is going to impact and how people will be some. So looking at both the aspects, it is like security by design and privacy by design is something which you need to bring in. Security by design, both of them can't be bolted, but we have been bolting security, but I don't know whether how will you do privacy. And if it's not there in your design, so it will be an uphill task. But yes, all you need to see is that you need to collect data with consent. You need to collect data which has a purpose, not more than that. And that consent actually will bring out to say that how are you going to use that data, and then safeguard that data.
Okay, thank you. Alok, I'll come to you next, taking the cue from what you have mentioned earlier about one, the scalability part, where the scale is big enough, and internal awareness, or where the source of vulnerability is maximum. From a PSU perspective, what sort of mechanism or best practices would you advise, especially to tackle these challenges?
There are a lot of technological solutions which exist to do this, but what I always follow, or probably would like to advise to people who are still yet to be initiated in monitoring. If you are able to monitor your assets, and there are solutions available there, it can be your own, you can devise your own. If you are able to monitor the assets which are deployed, whether they are IT assets or OT assets, in terms of the behavioral anomaly. First is knowledge of the asset itself, monitoring the asset for behavioral anomaly addresses a big part of the vulnerability ecosystem that exists. Because at the end of the day, if an attacker is to exploit a vulnerability that exists, it will trigger a pattern. And that pattern will not be consistent with, in majority of the cases, will not be consistent with what a regular traffic of data or between the IT, OT environment or within the environment is there. So that is the heuristic analysis part of it by using the monitoring infrastructure. Second is, it might be controversial, may not be very good to sound music to many people here. IT OT should be separated.
Yes.
Air gap is a must for people who have this penchant of integrating them for the purposes of beautiful dashboards that we want to present to our management. Use sandboxing. Get the data in a sanitized manner, use it in a different manner, rather than integrate them and use them. If you are doing these two things, I think and especially for areas which are widespread, geographically located in multiple locations, if you are able to segregate IT OT infrastructure, you again, obviously it's a risk-based approach. We have examples galore where air gap exists and still you have had these problems of air gap being jumped or breached. At the end of the day, it's a risk-based approach game. When you create an air gap and observe it religiously, you are reducing your risk to a very high level. So that is all I would want to say.
Okay. Thanks for touching the very critical aspect of and advising on keeping the IT and OT separate. In fact, I would next come to Anwaya Bilas, and I'll put this question only from a perspective of the OT security part. That's where vulnerable. Maybe IT security by now, most of the organizations have evolved to a level extent. Definitely OT. There are a lot of legacy devices still lying there, and so how do you tackle that challenge?
Well, a very difficult thing to tackle. Obviously, lot of legacy systems, number one, in OT. Secondly, very limited vendor support. Lot of things where you really, because of the real-time system, you really can afford to have a downtime and upgrade the patches. In many cases, the core kernel do not support patches. So these things are nowadays possibly a known vulnerability have been much discussed. I believe the biggest solution lies with, again, going to the basics and do the risk assessment. Try not to basically keep all those devices. If it is not really necessary, you have to identify. First and foremost is what I think Sir has also told is visibility. Very important. You must have a clear visibility of your perimeter. You must have an entire list of your asset, including the software bomb. Software bomb is one of the gray area when most of the things, many of us do not really know what exactly are the applications running in my system. We don't have a list of that. We don't have the updated patch of that. So that is very, again an important thing. And then the visibility, heuristic analysis of the behavior, network behavior analysis, having continuous monitoring of what type of traffic is going, have strict policy in place so that port-based, IP-based filter in your firewall you can do, and you can start monitoring whether there are any other type of traffic going on. So these are a few type of things we are doing, and we are trying to secure our OT, though it's a very big challenge. And lastly, I should say, wherever you are really finding that, okay, there are legacy systems where you cannot directly implement a control, must have a peripheral control in place. You cannot keep it like that and take the risk as assumed. You must mitigate that risk through certain peripheral control in your system. Could it be engineering control, or could be administrative control, whatever it is, but you have to do that. That is obviously a challenge, but we are doing that.
Okay, so important aspect is this peripheral control that you have talked about. Manmeet, I'll come to you with a little variation on that. When we are talking about security in these various layers, organizations are working with multiple security vendors also, third-party service providers, and there is no one fit for all, different aspects. So there itself, how much is a challenge for organization when you are working with so many third-party vendors, and that itself, so trying to secure itself, are we sort of opening up another vulnerability? What is your experience?
Okay, so based on my experience, I would say doesn't matter whether we are working 10 vendors, 10 OEMs or 100 OEMs. Basic thumb rule is we should follow the risk-based approach, not only for the compliance-based approach. If I know what are the risks associated with my organization, what are the risks on what level of risk we do have, and what could be the impact of that risk. According to that, we should at least highlight the major part and the critical part where we should be focused more. It can be third party risk, because if you are dealing with lot of vendors, lot of OEMs, or lot of partners, then third party risk is associated. You don't know what type of security they are following, what type of controls they have put in their place in their system. So, and we have to think, like being I would say, the ownership of our organization, we have to think that if I'm giving the control to any third party vendor, whether it's his employee or his network, the what kind of controls I can place on my system, so that if they will be harmful, then that impact should not become to me. Correct. uh, Accordingly, because it is not in your control, that you cannot update their antiviruses, you cannot update their machines, you cannot control their firewalls rules, what type of management they are doing. That is one thing. Third party control, continuously risk assessment of the third party controls, we should do that. Again, if, because one biggest truth is of this entire cybersecurity world is that nobody is 100% safe. So we have to be prepared that if by knowingly unknowingly any malware has entered to my environment, how I can ensure that it would have a very minimum impact on my machine. Right. So 2-3 things which we should take care. That one, we have to identify what are my critical assets and what kind of criticality we do have. Another thing, if first of all, any organization might have some vulnerabilities. Otherwise, if we protect 100% vulnerabilities, then organization may not able to do the businesses. Right, because a lot of legacy applications may be there in the PSU sectors or enterprise segments also. So we have to think that if any server, whatever the server is, if it is internet facing, it must be patched without any zero compromises. Second, we should have a proper incident response playbook. If any incident has happened, then what we need to take and who will be accountable for what kind of things, that has to be very clearly defined, and each and every person should be aware about their role and responsibilities, so that we can immediately roll back, we can immediately fix that issue. So these are the, I think, areas where we should be focused more, and we do.
Okay. Thanks for that elaborate explanation. Virander, taking cue from what you have said earlier, this work from anywhere thing accentuated during the COVID times, what we know, and a mechanism was built at that time, sort of because people were accessing from anywhere, primarily from homes, using any device, any network. So isn't there, in terms of by now it's more than 3 years, a mechanism in terms of cybersecurity mechanism not already in place, or are there still challenges for that work from anywhere kind of one? What is your experience?
During COVID time, work from home definitely run the show, and many organizations survived during that period. So that helps. But during that period, we have everybody knows that during that period, the number of attacks or the breaches were exponentially high. So there were such factors like, as earlier informed, that devices were not patched or properly sanitized. Users were also not aware. So, but it's already 2-3 years time, and several organizations have taken security measures and enhanced their security. And in cybersecurity, we can't 100% ensure that there will be never an attack, but we have to day improve our security posture. So definitely there are several new solutions, tools now available, and people are using, and they are uh, giving very good results. And while using these solutions, there you can fix the accountability of the person also, that it's not only the organization responsibility or the IT security team responsibility only. Everybody has to play their role. Everybody need to be aware and well aware, so that at official level and as well as on personal level, there should not be the breach of data or their personal data as well.
Exactly.
So such kind of solutions are available now, and people are well aware, and in better position now.
Thanks. A very important thing you mentioned, that no organization can be 100% secure, and it's always an evolving process. So before we conclude, I'll come to each panelist and very briefly for 30 seconds. And you can speak about your specific organization or about the PSU environment in general. What I would like to understand is, from a security point of view, what are the actionable insights that you plan to take, if I may say, in the next 12 to 18 months, starting with you, Sandeep?
Okay, so talking about actionable insights in general would be that, see, today we are in a scenario when we've already talked about visibility, asset management, and looking at your crown jewels, everything. But today the response is that, okay, prevention is better than cure. I would like to have my preventive controls well in place, but I know that since it is like an assumed breach scenario today and we talk of zero trust, detection and response becomes very important. And to bring in detection and response, you look at continuous monitoring. So you're continuously looking at your vulnerabilities, continuously looking at your attacks which are happening on you, and then responding to them. When I talk of vulnerabilities, responding in terms of patching them on a near real-time basis on as fast as possible. And when I talk of, say, any attack, in terms of containing that particular attack in case it actually comes onto your system and has an impact. So this should be the general strategy. Last but the least is in terms of building a culture. So the culture, a security culture being part of your organization, that is very essential. The moment you think that security is primary or is initial part of, or is part and parcel of your strategy, or part and parcel of your design, part and parcel of whatever the approach of your digitization is, I think so you're going to have a good night's sleep.
Okay, thanks. Alok.
I think I will start off from where Sandeep sir left, the culture part of it. In my organization, I can build culture down to the lowest level, last man. It can be pushed through, that's okay. But it has to start at some point, and that some point is the fountainhead of the organization. So first actionable that I recommend or I intend to pursue, at least in this organization and recommend to pursue in all PSUs, government everywhere, is that realizing the importance of cyber security. What happens is this a very low probability, high impact event. Any oversight on cyber security has a very low probability but a very high impact event which can happen. And since it is very low probability, it is always under the radar. Beneath the radar, it is not being scrutinized as given as much importance that it should be given, because it is always treated as a cost center. So if you are able to bring in that level of sensitivity that yes, it's a very low probability but a very high impact event that can happen. And to give you an example in the railway context, if one of the OT systems can be manipulated to bring about a train collision, derailment, global trends post June 23 show that defacement of website, DDoS on ticketing systems is passe. People have gotten into your OT, they're causing derailments and collisions. This is happening through the cyber route very often now, post 23 June. So that sensitization that this can be done, especially in the Indian context, where you have not so friendly neighborhood all around, and the state being involved, all your adversaries, state being involved to have the competence. I think sensitivity of the impact of a low probability event. That is it.
Okay, Anwaya.
Very quickly, 3 layers. One obviously is the regulatory front, regulatory and procedures, policies. We have came up with Indian Electricity Grid Code Chapter 8, which talks about cybersecurity. CA regulation is coming up, and then trusted vendor scheme or those type of schemes. Strengthening the regulatory implementations, the policy is very important. Second, obviously from the people perspective, continuous awareness, training, very important. But what we are now trying to do have collaboration across various verticals of industry from various levels or various, resources. We need collaboration. We need not only awareness but collaboration. Suppose an operator is seeing some problem, he must know where to report, what to do, immediately how to isolate the system. So that those type of training and collaboration with the cybersecurity guys, means cybersecurity guys should not be looked as a hindrance to the business operation. They should be looking from a supportive role. So that type of a change in culture is very important. And third, obviously, adoption of technology, always very important. But it's most important that you do your risk analysis. Don't just adopt technology just for the sake of adopting technology.
True.
Adopt the right technology which is needed for you, which you can utilize. Many a time you will find that we are adopting technology, but we are not harnessing the full potential of the technology. We need to utilize the technology in right direction, in right way. So adopt those technology which you can utilize, and obviously tune that technology for the best purposes. You should select security for continuity of your business. That is most important. So these three, I think, are the most important thing which we are looking around.
Yes, that's a critical aspect in terms of having that right balance. Just adopting technology for the sake of it won't take us anywhere. And as you earlier also mentioned, Alok also reiterated the OT and the IT part. That is where the big challenge lies. Manmeet, in terms of the actionable insight that you would recommend.
So I would like to continue where you stop. Basically, the doesn't matter for us whether we should use 10 tool, 20 tool, or 30 tool. I do follow that approach that we will use only 2 tool or 3 tools, but I will ensure that 100% effectiveness of these tools must be there. Another thing, the regulation requirements, we do assess our regulatory requirements on very frequently basis, and assess the risk register on every on very frequently basis, that what are the risks, and we do assess at that level whether any
If I
low
may
risk.
interrupt, this regulatory requirement thing, and Anwaya also talked about it. Very briefly, if you can just touch upon it. Fine, conforming to regulatory requirement is a must. But does it in some way compromise the efficiency of the business itself?
Not at all, but which I do not fit, it will basically compromise your performances, though it will help you to sustain a longer duration, right? Whether we talk about any framework, you can pick up ISO and NIST framework, you can pick up MITR framework, we can pick up, right? Any certain guidelines we can pick up, right? So all are is helping us, the organizations, to sustain in this digital world where the attack surface has been increased so much, right?
Okay.
180% has been increased. Those guidelines are very useful, very effective if we implement in a right manner and right approach.
Okay, thanks. And Virander, you have the last word. Again, I will come back to what you earlier stated, this work from anywhere, and that's a new reality. We may not go back to the COVID scenario, but work from anywhere is a reality in terms of this hybrid mode. So going forward in this hybrid mode of work, what further challenges do you foresee? And what would be your recommendation of an actionable insight, keeping that in mind?
So, hybrid work culture is now normal.
True.
So, and if you talk to someone, he definitely want a hybrid, or if you give him choice on office, regular office or hybrid work culture, definitely hybrid is now normal. So we have to align our security accordingly, so that because now it's a part of culture, and everybody now better aware from the past 2-3 years. So now people have to think that if they are aware, then they definitely at personal and official level, they will be protected, their office assets, the image of their organization will be better or not defamed. So if we have to make these habits, cybersecurity a best practice part of our habits, then definitely our workforce will perform better and in hybrid environment as well.
So, okay.
So,
So,
sorry, I'll just take
yes,
10
sure,
seconds,
sure.
please. Just to answer one of your thing of the regulatory thing, I should say one thing only, that regulatory requirement is very important, but we need to frame the regulation in a way that it is implementable. Regulation should not be something a dream come true or something like that. It should
True.
be in a way that which is possible for implementation by the utilities. It should, then it won't be a
I
hindrance.
meant it that way. Obviously,
Yeah,
regulation
then
is
it won't mean, but we are seeing regulations which is coming up, which is really impossible to be implemented, and then it is
True.
not getting implemented. That should not be the case. So we must give all our inputs while framing the regulation that it is implementable. And one thing I think I have not touched upon, very important, that a very robust incident response and disaster recovery mechanism. We all need to work on that, and we have to be ready with that.
That's a practical part. Yeah, look, the last word, literally.
I think the regulatory piece is very tempting to intervene. We don't have a regulatory environment in India except for the BFSI sector and something in the coming up in the power
The
sector.
pharma and those sectors.
So the regulatory environment for pharma is not related to IT and cybersecurity.
Exactly.
So it's business specific regulatory environment. The IT and cybersecurity requirement of the business, that regulatory part is absolutely missing except for the BFSI, and now they're coming in for the power sector.
True.
Otherwise, cybersecurity in India is being handled by means of guidelines and advisories, which is a disaster for something has to be done, which maybe again controversial, but it's disastrous.
No, that's a high warning. That's you cannot just work on advisory and guidelines. Okay, great. Thanks to all the panelists. We had a very enlightening discussion, and it's lunch. Otherwise, we could have maybe continued. So before we disperse, I would request Sanghamitra Mohanty to come on stage and hand over a token of appreciation to all our panelists. Can we have the tokens? Yes. I would call Mr. Sandeep Khanna, Director Information Security and CISO of